I planted stones, but a diamond tree grew.
She's a witch! She's practicing witchcraft!
In a low, green valley, far from the noise of cities, there was a small Nigerian village, shaped by patience and soil. The land there was generous. It welcomed seeds easily and returned them with interest. Yams rose thick and proud from the earth. Carrots pushed through the soil in neat orange lines. Leafy vegetables spread wide, glossy, and alive. Farming was not just survival in this village, it was identity. To know how to plant was to belong. And yet, among the many farmers who bent their backs to the land, there was one woman who never fit into the rhythm of the village. Her name was Ada. Ada was old. 60 years had etched themselves into her bones, her hands, and her slow, careful walk. Her back curved forward like a question the world had never answered. She lived alone in a small mud house at the edge of the village, where the path thinned and the trees grew closer together. No husband, no children, no visitors who stayed longer than courtesy required. Every morning before the sun climbed too high, Ada would walk to the communal farmland with a woven basket balanced on her head. Other farmers carried seeds. Ada carried stones, smooth stones, rough stones, heavy stones that bruised her palms. She chose them carefully, rinsed them with water, and pressed them into the soil with the same tenderness other farmers reserved for seeds. And every day the village watched. At first, the laughter was quiet. Whispered jokes exchanged between neighbors, children pointing and giggling behind their mothers' wrappers, men shaking their heads as they sharpened hoes and murmured about age finally loosening a woman's grip on sense. "Stone cannot grow," they said. "Her mind has gone soft. Old age has finally claimed her." Ada heard them all. She heard the laughter. She felt the eyes. But she never answered. She never defended herself. She simply knelt, dug small holes into the soil, placed the stones inside, covered them gently, and whispered words only the earth could hear. Days passed, weeks followed. Every seed around Ada's plot responded to the sun and rain. Leaves unfolded, stems thickened. The land sang with growth, but Ada's portion of the field remained silent, flat, unchanged. Each evening when she returned to check the soil and found nothing, no sprout, no crack, no promise, Ada would kneel and cry. Not loud cries, not the kind that attract comfort. Her tears fell quietly, darkening the soil above the buried stones. She would wipe her face with the back of her hand and whisper prayers to a God who, so far, had chosen not to answer. The villagers noticed this too. Their laughter sharpened. Some days they followed her to the farm just to watch her fail. They mocked her openly now, calling her madwoman, stone planter, empty-headed old fool. Some pushed her baskets over. Others kicked the soil she had carefully shaped. A few went further, shoving her shoulders and shouting at her to leave the land. "Stop disgracing us! Do you want the earth to curse the village? Go home and wait for death like other old women." Ada never fought back. She never shouted. She only cried harder. One afternoon, as she knelt in her usual place, tears soaking into the dust, a group of young men surrounded her. Their laughter was cruel, loud, impatient. "You have lost your senses," one of them said. "People like you bring bad luck," another added. "Stop coming here." When she did not move quickly enough, hands grabbed her arms. She was pushed. She fell into the dirt she loved. Her basket spilled. Stones rolled away like accusations. Ada sobbed, her thin shoulders shaking, while the men walked away laughing, satisfied. That day she did not return home by the usual path. Instead, she turned away from the village and walked toward the abandoned land beyond the hills. Few people went there. The soil was darker, wetter. Rainwater gathered in small pools beneath tall, quiet trees. It was said the place held memories older than the village itself. Ada walked slowly, guided by instinct more than direction, until she reached the ruins of an old house. Its roof had collapsed long ago. Moss covered its walls. Inside, beneath broken clay pots and dust, she found stones unlike any she had planted before. These stones were different. They were cold to the touch, even under the afternoon sun. Their surfaces reflected light faintly, as though they remembered something bright. Ada did not question it. She gathered them carefully, wrapped them in cloth, and carried them back. This time not to the village farmland, but to her own small plot, where rainwater always settled first. She planted them just as she always had. Then she went home. She did not return the next day. She did not return the day after. The villagers noticed her absence and shrugged. Perhaps shame had finally driven her away. Perhaps death had found her quietly in her hut. Life continued. Crops grew. Laughter returned to normal conversations. 3 days later, Ada came back. The sun had barely risen when she reached her plot. The air was still heavy with mist. Birds were quiet, as if waiting. What she saw stopped her breath. From the earth where she had planted the stones, something had broken through the soil, not leaves, not stems. Tall, sharp structures rose upward, catching the early light and breaking it into colors the land had never seen. The soil glittered. The air shimmered. They were trees. But not trees of wood. They were trees of diamond, clear, radiant, impossible. Each branch refracted the sun into soft rainbows. The ground around them glowed faintly, as though the earth itself was breathing light. Ada fell to her knees. She did not scream. She did not run. She cried the way someone cries when prayer finally finds an answer. She pressed her forehead to the glowing soil and thanked God with every broken word she had saved over the years. By midday, the village could no longer ignore what had happened. People gathered at the edge of her land, staring. Murmurs turned into arguments. Some crossed themselves in fear. Others whispered greedily. A few said it was witchcraft. Others said no human hand could do such a thing. Hasada entered the village like smoke. By evening, they agreed on one thing. Ada must be reported to the king. That sentence moved through the village faster than truth ever had. It passed from mouth to mouth, growing heavier with each telling. By nightfall, it had transformed from concern into accusation, from curiosity into certainty. Before dawn, messengers were sent. They walked the narrow paths toward the palace compound, their sandals kicking dust into the air as they rehearsed their story. They would not speak of the years Ada had spent kneeling in mockery. They would not mention the bruises on her arms or the tears she fed to the soil. They would speak only of diamonds, of sudden wealth, of power that did not belong to ordinary hands. By the time the king rose from sleep, the story had already reached his ears. The king of the village was a man shaped by authority. His throne was carved from Iroko wood, polished by generations of rule. He had grown used to land disputes, stolen goats, broken promises. But this was different. A woman who planted stones and harvested diamonds? The thought disturbed him. Not because it seemed impossible, but because it threatened the order he understood. Power, after all, was meant to follow rules. He ordered his guards to bring Ada to him. They found her where she always was, kneeling before the glowing trees, her face calm, her eyes swollen from crying too much joy into one mourning. She did not resist when they touched her shoulders. She rose slowly, dust clinging to her wrapper, and followed them without a word. The village followed too. People gathered behind the guards like shadows. Some watched with fear, others with hunger. A few with guilt they refused to name. Ada walked in the center of it all, her feet bare against the ground, her posture bent but unbroken. When she reached the palace courtyard, silence fell. The king studied her from his throne. He expected madness in her eyes. He expected arrogance. Instead, he saw only tiredness. the kind that comes from waiting too long for mercy. "Old woman," the king said, his voice steady, "what have you planted in the earth?" "Stones," Ada replied softly. The crowd laughed. "And what grew from them?" the king asked. Ada lowered her gaze. "What God allowed." That answer unsettled him. The king rose and motioned with his hand. "Take me to this land." They led him through the village, past fields heavy with vegetables, past familiar soil that obeyed familiar laws. Then they reached Ada's plot. The moment the diamond trees came into view, the king stopped. He had seen wealth before: gold dust, ivory, rare cloths traded from far lands. But this felt different. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches cutting sunlight into colors that danced across the king's robes. The earth beneath them glowed faintly, as though remembering fire. The king stepped closer, his breath caught in his throat. For a long moment, he said nothing. In that silence, something shifted inside him. Wonder gave way to suspicion, and suspicion hardened into fear. Fear, when mixed with power, often chooses cruelty. "No ordinary woman can do this," the king said at last. The villagers nodded eagerly. "She must be using forbidden knowledge," someone shouted. "This is witchcraft," another agreed. "She threatens the balance of the land." The king turned to Ada. "Who taught you this?" "No one," she said. "What spirit helped you?" "None." "Then explain," he demanded, his voice rising, "how stones become diamonds." Ada looked at the trees, then back at the king. "I planted what I was given. I waited. I prayed." The king's face darkened. Prayer was acceptable, mystery was not. He stepped back and raised his hand. "Arrest her!" The words fell like a blade. The guards seized Ada. The crowd gasped, then murmured approval. The king straightened his robe, convincing himself he was protecting his people. "She is dangerous," he declared. "Until the truth is known, she will remain imprisoned." Ada did not scream. As they dragged her away, she turned once more toward the trees. Not with longing, not with regret, only with quiet understanding. She had learned long ago that blessings often attract chains. The prison was cold. It was a low stone building near the edge of the palace grounds, meant for criminals who waited for judgment or forgot the meaning of freedom. Ada was thrown inside, the door slammed shut behind her. Darkness swallowed her. Days passed. No one came to ask her questions. No one brought comfort. The diamond trees were guarded closely now, soldiers stationed nearby, watching them day and night. The king visited often, standing beneath their glow, imagining the power they promised. In the prison, Ada grew weaker. Her body, already thin from years of hardship, could not withstand the damp air and hunger. Each night, she whispered prayers into the dark, not for release, but for peace. She wondered quietly if this was always how it would end, if patience was meant to be punished. One night, her breathing slowed. By morning, Ada was gone. The guards found her still, her face calm, her hands folded as though she had chosen rest. They informed the king with practiced detachment. He nodded. "Bury her," he said, "and say nothing more." Life moved on. The diamond trees remained. Years passed. The king claimed the land as royal property. He ordered the diamonds harvested carefully, turned into wealth beyond imagination. Traders came from distant places. The village changed. Houses grew larger. Greed grew louder. The king became rich, very rich. Yet at night, when the palace fell quiet, the king sometimes dreamed of an old woman kneeling in soil, crying softly over stones no one believed in. He always woke unsettled. And somewhere beneath the glowing trees, the earth remembered Ada. Seasons turned, as they always did. Rains came and left. Harmattan winds swept dust across the village, coating roofs and memories alike. Children who once laughed at an old woman planting stones grew into adults who now spoke her name only in lowered voices, if at all. Time did what it does best. It softened the edges of guilt without erasing it. The king's wealth expanded beyond anything the village had known. The diamonds were unlike any other, clearer, stronger. They carried a strange brilliance that merchants could not explain, but eagerly paid for. Caravans arrived from distant lands. Coins filled the royal treasury. The palace was rebuilt with finer wood, stronger walls, and polished floors that reflected light like shallow water. The king became powerful far beyond his borders. With wealth came influence. With influence came fear. Neighboring rulers sent gifts. Messengers bowed lower. The king's name began to travel farther than his kindness ever had. Yet something subtle began to change. At first, it was small. The king noticed that crops near the diamond trees no longer grew as richly as before. The soil around them hardened. Farmers complained quietly, afraid to question royal land. The river that passed near Ada's plot began to shrink earlier each dry season. Fish disappeared. The land, once generous, grew quiet. The king dismissed these signs. Prosperity, he believed, always came with small sacrifices. But the dreams returned, not every night, not predictably. They came like sudden storms. In them the king saw Ada, not as she had looked in chains, but as she had looked in the field, kneeling, patient, her hands pressed into the soil with reverence. Sometimes she looked up at him, sometimes she did not. But always, she was crying. He would wake with his chest tight, the echo of her quiet sobs lingering in the dark. He never spoke of these dreams. Instead, he ordered more diamonds harvested. The more they took, the more the land resisted. Cracks formed in the earth beneath the trees. The glow dimmed slightly like a fire starved of air. Some branches dulled. A few diamonds lost their shine, turning cloudy, brittle. Merchants began to notice. Strange, they said. They were brighter before. The king grew angry. He summoned elders, priests, herbalists, diviners. Each offered a different explanation. Some spoke of imbalance. Some whispered of appeasement. One old priest, his voice trembling, mentioned Ada's name. The king silenced him. "Do not speak of the dead," he said sharply, but the land continued its quiet rebellion. One year, a great drought struck. Not just the village, but the surrounding lands. Crops failed, wells dried. People walked longer distances for water. Hunger crept into homes that had once known abundance. Still, the palace remained full. The king's wealth protected him from the worst of it. Food arrived from afar. Guards stood well-fed. The contrast between palace and village grew sharper, more painful. Whispers began again, not of witchcraft this time, but of injustice. People remembered Ada. They remembered how she had been laughed at, beaten, accused, imprisoned. They remembered that her death had not brought peace, but wealth for one man and suffering for many. Some said the land was mourning her. Others said the earth does not forget hands that treat it with patience. The king heard these whispers too. One evening, as the drought deepened, he walked alone to the diamond trees. Guards followed at a distance, instructed not to speak. He stood beneath the branches, now noticeably dimmer, and touched one of the diamonds. It felt cold, colder than before. He closed his eyes, and for the first time he allowed himself to remember the old woman's voice. I planted what I was given. I waited. I prayed. A thought crept into his mind, unwelcome and persistent. What if the miracle was never meant to be owned? The thought angered him. He pushed it away and ordered the harvesting to continue. That night, the dream returned, stronger than ever. This time, Ada stood beneath the trees, but they were bare. The land around her was cracked and dry. She looked at the king, not with accusation, not with anger, but with deep sadness. "You took what did not belong to you," she said. The king woke shouting. Sweat soaked his robes. His heart raced. He summoned servants for water, then dismissed them angrily. He sat alone until dawn, staring at his hands. From that day on, his health began to fail. At first, it was fatigue, then sharp pains in his chest. His appetite faded. The best healers could find no cause. No herb helped, no ritual restored him. His strength weakened as his wealth remained untouched. The people noticed. They spoke openly now. "This is the price," some said. "The earth is collecting its debt," others whispered. The king grew paranoid. He ordered more guards around the diamond trees as if protection could quiet a curse. He accused advisors of betrayal. He dismissed loyal servants in fits of suspicion. But the land did not respond to fear. One morning, a strange thing happened. A child, sent to fetch water near Ada's old plot, returned running. "The trees!" he cried. "They are changing!" People gathered. Where the diamond trees once stood tall and radiant, cracks now ran through their trunks. Some diamonds had fallen to the ground, shattered. Others had dulled completely, becoming lifeless stones indistinguishable from those Ada had once planted. Panic spread. The king was carried to the site, weak and trembling. When he saw the broken diamonds, something inside him finally broke too. He fell to his knees, not as a ruler, as a man. For the first time, he wept openly before his people, not for lost wealth, but for a truth he could no longer deny. He had mistaken patience for madness, faith for foolishness, and a miracle for a threat. The ground beneath him was silent. It did not answer. The people waited. And somewhere deep within the land, a reckoning was still unfolding. The king remained on his knees long after the people stopped whispering. His tears fell onto the hardened soil, but the earth did not soften for him. He pressed his palms into the ground as Ada once had, yet nothing answered his touch. No warmth, no light, only silence. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. This was not repentance as they understood it. This was desperation. That night, the king ordered Ada's grave to be found. Few remembered where she had been buried. Her death had been quiet, her body lowered into the ground without ceremony, without song. It took hours of searching before they found a small mound at the edge of the village, overgrown with weeds and forgotten prayers. The king was carried there at dawn. He stood before the grave, leaning heavily on his staff. The air was still. Even the birds seemed to avoid the place. "I was wrong," he said aloud, his voice hoarse. "I did not understand." The earth did not respond. He ordered offerings brought, food, cloth, coins, jewels cut from the very diamonds that had made him rich. They were placed upon the grave in careful arrangement. He bowed his head, waiting for forgiveness to take form. Nothing happened. The people began to realize something the king had not yet accepted. Some debts cannot be paid with wealth. That evening, an old woman approached the elders. She was nearly blind, her voice thin with age, but her words carried weight. "Ada planted stones," she said, "but she harvested patience. What grew was never meant to be taken. It was meant to be witnessed." The elders listened. "She did not plant for riches," the woman continued. "She planted because she believed. The earth answered her faith, not our hunger." The words spread quietly through the village. For the first time, no one laughed. The next morning, the remaining diamond trees collapsed. Not violently, not with thunder. They crumbled slowly, dissolving back into the soil, leaving behind nothing but ordinary stones. Dull, heavy, unremarkable. The glow faded completely. The land returned to silence. The king watched from his chamber, too weak to stand. When the last sparkle vanished, his breath did too. He died without a crown on his head, without diamonds in his hands. Only questions followed him into the dark. In the weeks that came after, the drought broke. Rain returned gently, soaking into the soil as if washing something old away. Crops began to grow again, slowly but steadily. The land healed, though it never forgot. The villagers gathered where Ada's plot had once been. They did not plant diamonds, they planted vegetables, trees, flowers. And at the center of the field, they placed a simple stone, not buried, not hidden, just resting on the earth. A reminder. Children were told the story of the old woman who planted stones, not as a warning, but as a lesson. They were taught that belief does not always look like wisdom, that patience is often mistaken for madness, and that the earth listens differently than people do. Ada's name was spoken again, softly, with respect. And though no diamond ever grew in that village again, something else did, understanding. Because some miracles are not meant to be owned. They are meant to be honored. And the earth, in its quiet way, always remembers who treated it with faith.